As I look,
Thank you guys very much. I'm going to start off with a story. So I want you to envision eastern Iowa, about an hour north of Davenport near the Mississippi River, rolling hills, pine trees, and a farm. Your typical farmhouse, sitting on the back porch with your grandfather. My grandfather's name was Joe Gerlach. And I was about 12 years old. I grew up in San Antonio, so I'm a city boy, I freely admit. My mom came from the farm. We would go visit them in the summer and in the winter, and I could come up north and find out what winter really is. I live in San Antonio, and when it gets to 40 degrees, everyone breaks out their big heavy coats. You guys are walking around in short sleeve shirts. But I'm sitting on the back porch, I'm 12 years old, and it's July. And my grandfather and grandmother had just built a brand new house. They inherited the farm from their parents, your typical two-story white farmhouse from the 1920s. And so now they've built the new one, and we're sitting on the back porch, and a rainstorm comes. My grandfather and grandmother were corn and soybean farmers, okay? And my grandfather's got this huge grin on his face. I mean, he's just smiling. And I just said, Grandpa Joe, what are you smiling for? And he said, this rainstorm's gonna pay off this house. And I'm thinking, I'm looking outside, is it raining cash? I mean, or is it if you're from insurance, is it a hail claim? What's coming on? What's going on? And that's when he taught me four things. And I call this speech priorities from the porch, okay? First one is vision. He taught me a lot about vision with this story, and I'm gonna go into it a little more here in just a minute. Planning, stewardship, and most of all, discipline. So the first thing I wanna talk about is vision and how this relates to planning for your financial future. You gotta ask yourself big questions, the stuff you don't ask yourself every day. So I like to say, where do you want to be in 5, 10, 20, 40 years? It's not normal conversation. I don't meet someone, hey Audrey, how's it going? Where are you going to be in 20 years? It's just not something you normally do. But it's absolutely critical that you ask yourself these questions because you got to get an idea of where you want to go, okay? Another question is, what kind of legacy do I want to leave for my family, my church? I call it the 3 C's, children, church, and community, okay? A legacy is something you give. A legacy is something that you give freely. Okay, and this also gets you into more of a long-term thinking mindset. And then the last thing you got to ask yourself is, what do I need instead of what do I want? And we all struggle with this, okay? I'm not sitting up here telling you that this is easy or that, I've perfected this. I haven't. I struggle with this as much as anybody. And then last, can I get there with my current income? Ask yourself these things periodically. My grandfather said, where do you want to be in 20 years? And I said, I don't know. I'm only 13. 20 years is forever from now. I have no idea. And so these are the 2 main questions you've got to ask. Once you ask these questions and you get an idea of what you want, maybe you want to leave the farm to your family, or if you live in the city, maybe you want to leave them an inheritance so they don't have to struggle financially. There's no right or wrong answer to this. It's whatever's personal to you. Okay, so now planning. This is the part where I'm going to get into. Now, I am a banker. I freely admit there's going to be numbers in this. I'm a banker. There has to be numbers. But I promise I'm going to make it easy to understand, and I'm going to make it a little interactive, okay? So, first question I get a lot is, what's the difference between saving and investing? Because if you're going to plan for the future, you got to know the difference. Saving's a short-term horizon. You're buying something, okay? It's low risk. In other words, you can't afford to lose money. So, for example, an emergency fund. My grandfather, the first thing he said is you got to have a kitty. He called it a kitty. It's for the stuff that you can't plan for, like a refrigerator going out, your roof getting damaged, or like I just found out over Christmas, the siding on the side of our house is rotting and I've got to replace it all. That's not a cheap job, I found out. Cars, equipment, a house, vacation, that's what you save for, okay? So CDs, savings accounts, those are the vehicles you would put them in. Next thing is investing. This is a longer term horizon. This is for the 20 and 40 year questions. You don't mind losing some money in the beginning, but it's going to grow into something down the road. And I've got some examples to show you here. Okay, you can absorb some losses, retirement, things of that nature. Okay, estate planning. So, a quiz. You got Amber. Amber is going to start investing $100 a month when she turns 18 in an account that earns 8%. I promise the math doesn't get any harder than this. And she's going to stop investing at the age of 28. So in other words, $100 a month every month, and then when she turns 28, she's going to stop. Then you got Bruce. Anyone in here named Bruce? Okay, good. And Bruce is going to invest $100 a month starting on his 28th birthday in that same account that earns 8%. And he'll keep saving until the age of 65. So my question is, who will have more money at 65? Those of you who majored in finance and accounting in college, put your hands down. You don't get to answer this. How many of you think it's Amber? Okay, got a few. How many think it's Bruce? Amber puts in $12,000. Bruce puts in $44,500 out of his pocket. Amber has $340,000. Bruce has got $240,000. The difference in this is time. Amber got started sooner, okay? $100 a month. It's not, some people it's a lot of money, to some it's nothing. To me it's a lot of money, but it's $100 a month. Now here's the interesting part. The value at age 50 for Amber is just a little over $100,000. An extra $250,000 in earnings occurs over the last 15 years, okay? Keep that in mind for a minute, it's gonna become important later. Bruce has about 60, okay? Bruce has already put in far more money than Amber at this point, and he's still way behind. Now, out of curiosity, how much do you think Amber would have if she kept investing the $100 a month? Any guesses? Not quite, it's close. $625,000, okay? That's how time becomes your ally. Little bits over time that you don't notice. Over time, eventually, it's like a snowball effect. It starts small and it stays small for a while, but eventually it will grow into something big. Now, the good news is there's still hope for Bruce. Bruce isn't toast yet. Personally, Bruce isn't a bad option B at $250,000, I would think, but let's see. Bruce just got a new job. He's gonna make $30,000 a year and he has a 401k option. Some of you guys work for companies where that is a possibility. Company will match 100% of what Bruce contributes up to 4%. 4% of Bruce's salary, I'll do the math for you, is $1,200. So Bruce puts in $1,200, his employer will put $1,200 in that same account earning 8%. How much should Bruce save monthly? We should match it, okay? Anyone else? 401ks work because it's pre-tax money, okay? It's money before taxation. So number one, you're getting more in before the government takes their cut. Number two, the employer match is also pre-tax, okay? So you defer the tax liability to later. The matching amount at the very minimum. The reason for that is at age 65, he has $550,000. Now think about this for a minute. When he turns 28, we're assuming a couple of things. Number one, he's not going to get a pay raise. We're hoping Bruce is better than that. But the second thing is, he still hasn't caught up to Amber doing $100 a month starting at age 18. He's still behind by about $75,000. The lesson is get started as soon as possible, okay? Do something. If you have children, start an account, put $20 a month in it. I mean, just do something. It will pay dividends over the long run, okay? Now, another pop quiz. The average American has how many, is it consumer? Yes. How outstanding credit obligations? How many of you think it's A? How many of you think it's B? C? D? It's D. 15. This is the average, okay? The average. Yep. 6 installment loans, that would be the installment piece. Home, car, student loans, okay? 9 credit cards. It's the average. I work for a bank. We offer credit cards. I will tell you, I see people with this many lines of credit, if not more, okay? Yeah.
I'm sure I have at least 12 credit cards.
You might. Okay, the number isn't necessarily the problem, it's how you manage them, but that's a credit score discussion, which I've done before. So now we're gonna go to student loans, all right? This is about planning, and I promise I'm gonna tie all this together, just stay with me. So you just graduated from college, and you've got $25,000 in student loan debt. You've got, yeah, that's it.
One semester.
Yeah, that's one semester, yeah, depending on which college you went to. You've got 3 options. You can do a 10-year, a 15-year, or a 20-year. The 10-year has a rate of 4% and carries a payment of about $250. The next one, rate's a little higher, about 4.5%, but it drops the payment by $60. And then you got the 20-year, which is a 5% rate, and your payment's $164. There is no right or wrong option on this. I'm just trying to help you see the consequences of your decisions down the road. You're going to pay a little over $5,000 in interest if you just make the minimum payments for 10 years. So you're paying 1.2 times the loan amount. Okay, that's what the 21% is. The next one, $9,000 over the life of the loan just by extending it for 5 years. The last one, I'm almost scared to show it, $14,500. All right? But you don't notice it because what you think about on the daily basis, and this is the way we're wired as humans, is you think about the payment. $160 is easier to manage than $250. Yes, that's true. But there's a cost to that ease of use today. That's what you've got to weigh. All right, you got to think about today and think about where you're trying to go. It gets back to the big questions. All right, so we're going to beat up on Bruce a little bit again. If I said right now that I have an iPad that you can buy at Apple for $750, how many of you will buy it from me for $1,300? Any takers? No one ever says yes to this. Okay? Well, if you buy it with a credit card at a 16.99% rate and only make the minimums, that's what you're doing. And that 88 in the middle, that's the number of months it's going to take you to pay it off. You think that iPad's still going to work in 88 months? It's not, most likely. Or if you're like me and my son got a hold of it who just turned 7, that thing didn't last 2 weeks, I'm telling you. It was beat up because I got a new one. 75%, you're 75% above the purchase price of the iPad. So you're buying 1 3/4 iPads if you do it this way, okay? Now, you say, okay, I'm going to pay $50 a month. Certainly a better option than only paying the minimum. You're still going to pay $100 in interest, and it's going to take you 17 months to pay it off, okay? It's hard to see this when all you're thinking about is making the monthly payment, all right? Now, the cost of poor credit. I'm going to talk about this briefly. This is assuming you're buying a $27,000 Camry and a $150,000 home, okay? It really gets in the weeds on this because depending on where you live, the home prices vary, but for the illustration purchase. Auto loan, auto insurance, home mortgage, if you've got good credit, this is roughly what it'll cost you a month, all right? If you've got average credit is mid-700s to 700, okay? It's going to cost you about $1,300. And then if you have poor credit below 700, this is what it's going to cost you monthly, okay? So earlier we were talking about putting away $100. Managing your credit well is a way to save you money, and you can put it aside for something for the future. All right. So the one question I get all the time is, how do I improve my score? Now, this first one is brilliant. Y'all are going to love this. Pay your bills. Thank you. Yep. Pay your bills on time. That's the key. All right? If you screw up and you meant to pay the balance in full, but you kind of forgot, set up an automatic payment so at least the minimum gets paid. Because part of the way a credit score is figured is based on the timeliness of your payments. So you don't want to be late. That's the key. You're better off paying it on time, even if it's just the minimum, than a day later going in and paying it off. Your score will improve if you do that, all right? Next thing, pay down your revolving debt. Revolving debt is credit cards, any high interest, high balance accounts. I'm not talking about land or your home. That's a different category. Pay down your revolving debt first. If you're going to close an account, young lady in the back who said she has a lot of different lines of credit, do it wisely. Part of building a credit score is the history your accounts have been open, or the history of your accounts, how long they've been open, how long you've been paying on them. So if you've got 2 credit cards, one you've had for 15 years and used, and you've got one for 2 years that you haven't, close the 2-year one. Keep the 15-year one because that's got your history on it, okay? Now, one thing to keep in mind when you're closing accounts, another way a credit score is calculated is on your overall usage. So let's say you've got 3 credit cards and they each have a $10,000 limit. The credit bureaus look at it as you've got $30,000 in borrowing capacity. If you only put $10,000 a month on it, you're fine. If you put $25,000 a month on those cards, that's a problem because you're bumping up against that limit. Even if you pay them off every month, because even if you pay them off, you're still borrowing money. You're just not paying interest on it, okay? Subtle difference. Yes, ma'am?
So does it affect if you, like I just said earlier, I probably have 12 credit cards.
Right.
I have them sitting there.
Right.
Different stores or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Does it affect my credit to have open credit cards?
Not necessarily, okay? It's more about how often are you applying. So for instance, if you go to a department store and they offer you that deal where if you get our credit card, we'll give you 10% off. You do that every time, that's what hurts you because you keep applying for new credit cards. So the scoring system looks at it as you're over-reliant on credit, okay? Yes, ma'am?
How does it help the banks will automatically increase your limit? Should
That's more of a question. So one of the things when I do this talk, there's a lot of personal history with this and your own personal credit. So if it's kind of personal, bring it up to me afterwards and I'll talk on the side. I'll try to keep it general. Not necessarily, okay? It's more about what you're comfortable with. I mean, if they give you a credit card and it's got a $40,000 limit, you're not liable for fraud as long as you can prove it. You know, basically say I was in Nebraska, I wasn't in Vegas buying, you know, makeup or whatever. It's more what you're comfortable with and are you comfortable with that kind of exposure. So, now that example I gave earlier where you got 3 cards each with a $10,000 limit, let's say you've got one card that's got a $20,000 limit and 2 cards with 5. I would argue close the 2 with 5 because especially if you use the cards. The one with 20's got more room because once you get above 50% of that limit, they start watching you a little more in terms of the scoring system and the way the algorithm works. Does that make sense? Okay. Next thing, opening new accounts, that's the shopping story. That 10% discount can hurt you because it lowers your credit score over reliance on credit. Even if you're paying this off every month, you keep opening them, it can hurt you. Just do it wisely is all I say.
So when you're saying opening at department stores, now if you do it every once in a while, or
Yeah.
like once every so many years, I mean, I would just say no because that's what I'm scared of. But if
Right.
you would do like one and then not like, don't open like 5 of them at Christmas time, but like, okay, I'm going to use this one and then a few years later do another one. Is that a better way to do it?
I would say yes.
Okay.
Okay, one of the things with this scoring system is there are no hard and fast rules, there's just guidelines. Okay, we're bankers, we love to make things more complicated than they are, although we don't run the credit bureau system, I'll say that. No, I've done this myself. You know, you and your family, you're going on a vacation, you find a hotel card where if you put $3,000 on it, you get a bunch of points and it pays for a couple of nights. That's okay to do occasionally. That doesn't hurt you. It's the frequent shoppers and that type of stuff, that's where it hurts you. Think of it in terms of how many times you apply in a year. If you're doing one every month, that's going to be a problem. If you do it once a year, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And then it takes credit to build a good score. You got to use the lines a little bit. Yes, sir.
Is it the same as if you get a credit card and you go in for a loan and they pull your credit, is it roughly the same ding on your credit for that stuff?
All depends on the financial institution. Some, if it's the same bank, like for instance for us, we offer auto loans, we also offer credit cards. If you apply for them at the same time, we only pull your credit once. If you shop for a car, the credit bureaus expect you to shop around. So as long as you do it like within a 2 to 3 week window, you're fine. It'll just count as one hit. Same thing with homeowners. It's the credit card ones that are going to hit you every time if that's all you do.
Let's say if I go to your bank and I apply for your credit card and I go to Ag Direct,
That's a separate pull.
but does it affect your credit score pretty much equally, or?
If it hurts you, it's just a little. Credit scores update daily, they change daily, so it's not, it's more it's how often are you doing it? Because if you're shopping and you're being wise with your decisions, pulling your credit a couple times in a month is not unusual, it's common. You pull your credit a couple times every month for a year, that's what's going to get you in trouble. Okay? Good questions. Yes, ma'am.
When it takes credit to build credit. A lot of us have young children or teenage children.
Yes.
Is it a good idea when they graduate to open a credit card with that for them and help them build credit? I did not do that, and I had terrible credit because I was debt free until I was 25, and I went and applied and I had terrible credit. I didn't know that.
Right.
Because I never had anything. What is a good age? When should you start?
Okay. It's not that, I would argue it's not that you had terrible credit, it's that you had no credit.
No, yeah.
You had no history. That's the problem. I know a lot of people that will open a card for their 18. You got to be 18 first to get a card in your name, but you got to get a co-signer. We do that for a lot of folks at the bank, especially for Farm Bureau members, where we max the limit out of the 1,000. So even if the child goes nuts, your exposure's limited. I highly recommend that one until they prove they can handle the responsibility. If you do that, I personally think it's a good idea. There are some financial consultants out there. Dave Ramsey's one of them. I'm a fan of Dave Ramsey. He has a lot of really good advice on budgeting. The problem is the world you're living in when you're 18, credit score affects so many things. If you get a cell phone contract, car loans, student loans, your first mortgage, having credit history will help. Be strategic in how you do it would be my answer.
Okay, but to start at 18 is probably...
Yes, I would start at 18. I wouldn't do it before that. And just do it where never put more than 50% of the limit on the card. all right? That's another rule to live by. Charge $100 for something. Pay it off, wait a couple months, do something else. That will build the credit by itself. You don't need to use it constantly. I always say start small, get them responsible, and then increase the usage later if they've proven they can handle it. Because it's an expensive lesson, as anyone who's ever screwed up their credit knows. It's not an easy thing to fix, okay? Okay, so we talked about planning. Weigh your options. Know the consequences of your decisions, okay? You got to ask this stuff in the beginning, and it's hard, especially when you want that new truck or you want that new toy and the financing can get you there. We all struggle with this, okay? So I'm going to talk about stewardship here a little bit. So, quick question. Where do Amber and Bruce find $100 a month? Simple. Budgeting is absolutely critical. I talked about this earlier with Dave Ramsey. He's got an app called Every Dollar that is fantastic. It links with your bank account, and you can categorize, and yeah, I'm a huge fan myself. I'm a nerd, I freely admit it. But there's others out there. That he doesn't have the only one, okay? But budgeting, you got to know where your money's going both in and out, okay? Just like with your business, it's the same thing for those of you who are running your own business. All sources of income and expenses. Now, a lot of folks will tell you the best way to find $100 is to reduce some expenses. True, but that usually only works up to a certain point, especially when you have kids. My wife and I talk about this all the time. We have 2 kids, and our grocery bill's $1,000 a month. But those kids can eat, unlike anything I've ever seen. So you can only cut costs to a certain extent. My grandfather had multiple revenue streams. That was corn and soybeans. He ran cattle. He ran hogs for a brief period of time. What he ended up doing was combining other people's fields. It's a pretty rural county. At one point, he owned 4 combines outright. Like, didn't owe any debt on any of them. His priority was always pay equipment down first versus your house or the farmland. Why? Depreciate. Equipment goes down in value. How many of you think in 20 years your land's going to be worth more than it is today? It's not a trick question. I'm sorry? No, sir, they're not. But how many of you think your equipment's going to be worth more in 10 years than it is today? It's not. It's just a simple fact. Get the equipment paid off first, okay? Then you can sock away to land or other issues, okay? Secondly, look for areas to divert funds. So, for example, 2 fewer meals out a month. It's hard to go to a restaurant without spending $20. If you drink beer, I promise you it's more than that. If you drink wine, it's even more than, I was a waiter for 3 years in college. So there's $40. This one's the interesting thing to me. The average millennial spends $1,500 a year at Starbucks. $1,500. All right, Bob opinion, and if I offend anyone, I apologize now. Starbucks sucks, okay? We got scooters in Nebraska. If we're going to go anywhere, we're going to go to scooters. But no, go to Target, go to Walmart, buy a Mr. Coffee for $24.99, buy your ground up beans from the store. You will save $1,200 a year that way easy. I promise you, you just hit your $100 a month. I get it, it's fun. You want to go hang out with your friends at Starbucks. I'm not saying never go there, but these little decisions add up over time, okay? $1,500, that's average. That's like the credit card thing. It just floors me every time I hear it. So, mortgage, we're going to talk about this real quick. Amber's going to buy a $100,000 house with a 30-year mortgage. She's got 3 options. We're going to assume the rate's the same at 4%. Payment's $477. She's still going to pay $71,000 in interest if she only makes the minimum payment every month for 30 years. Okay? So she's buying the house 1.7 times. Now, a mortgage is different, so don't read it like credit card debt. But I want to show you a little something here. The payment, if we increase it to $500, she reduces the amount of interest she pays by $6,000 over the life of the loan, 330 months. So she knocks 30 months off the length of the mortgage. She pays it off 2.5 years sooner. For just an extra $23 a month in payment. Now, Amber's going to get aggressive. She's going to do $750 a month for the payment. She only pays $32,000 in interest. $132,000 over the life of the loan, and she does it in 15 years. She cuts it in half. So think about this. She's got her money in something that typically goes up in value, like the land. How many of us think our homes are going to go up in value if we take care of them? So she's sinking her money in something that goes up in value. So when she sells this house, she's got more equity, which means she's got to borrow less in the future. Again, the snowball effect. Think of what I was talking about earlier with the investing example. You've got money tied up in things that go up in value. It's only going to help you more down the road, okay? So, any of you ever feel like this dog? I've got all these different options. How do I prioritize this? First thing you got to do is pay off high interest debt. If you've got any credit card debt, if you've got anything on a revolving line of credit, get rid of it as quick as you can. Because the investment gains you make aren't going to catch up to the interest you're paying on the credit cards. Second thing, toys, cars, equipment before you're home. I talked about the example earlier, what my grandfather said. Pay down the equipment first before other things. And I will tell you, when I got on the scene, he had 4 snowmobiles. He had about 700 acres. When he inherited the farm, it was about a 50-acre farm, and he grew it one little piece at a time, 40 acres here, 70 acres here, until eventually he had over 750 acres. But where he really made his money was combining other people's fields. That was the value. He found a secondary source of income. When I got there, in the winter, it was all about snowmobiling and having fun fishing on frozen ponds. I promise it wasn't always that way. The other thing you need to take advantage of what you don't know. Find people around you who are doing it differently. There's a book out called The Millionaire Next Door, okay? These Wall Street guys did a study basically because they realized that they were investing for high net worth individuals, and so they wanted to find out what a high net worth individual looked like. So they invited some people who had several $1,000,000 invested with them to a suite at a hotel. And they had caviar and fancy foods and wine and champagne. People were showing up in their blue jeans and golf shirts and asking for a club sandwich and a Diet Coke. What they realized is wealth doesn't look like what we think it does. The guy who drives a beat up truck, whose kids go to college and become doctors and lawyers, they studied this. They've got data behind this. Those people are likely millionaires. Find the ones that aren't afraid to be a little different, okay? Use windfalls wisely. Personal story. When I was 16 years old, my dad thought it would be fun to enter a March Madness pool, and he paid for my entry. Well, I knew nothing about college basketball at the time. I ended up winning the thing. I won $500. He said, "What are you going to do with this?" I said, "I have no idea." I started thinking about toys. I was a 16-year-old kid. I could do this. He said, "What if we invested it?" "Yeah, but that's not that much fun, Dad." My dad was an investment advisor. He'd heard all the excuses and he knew how to sell me. I ended up investing it. It's hard. If you want to give yourself a little treat for a bonus, I get it. Try to save as much of it as you can or use it to pay down debt. And the most important thing of all is you've got to find an accountability partner. I talk about my grandfather, but my grandmother was equally important in this because she kept the books. And my grandmother was an old Irish Catholic. If you crossed her, oh man, there were consequences to pay, let me tell you. But she kept track of the books. In the combining operation, she made the meals for the guys when they were out working, harvesting the fields. It takes a team, all right? In every household, you've got a saver and a spender typically. You guys got to figure out a way to work together. I'm the saver, my wife's the spender. We fight about this. I'm going to be honest about this now. If you ever meet my wife, tell her I spoke kindly of her. But she helps me have fun because all I want to do is save and invest and pay down debt because some mythical day down the road I'm going to have more money. True, but you also got to live life today and you got to have some fun. Find a way to compromise. It can't just be within your house either. Find people around you who have similar goals, similar mindsets. You got to share what you're trying to do and your plans. You don't have to go through all the sordid details, but find accountability partners because the temptation is hard. Okay. So we talked about stewardship. How do I manage my resources? Reinvest in yourself when you get those financial windfalls. Pay down debt, invest, put it away. The best thing that happens when you get a pay raise, you're used to not having it. Divert more money to a 401k, save more. All right, you got to this point without that money, you don't need it now, okay? I know, I know it is. It's hard for me too. Everywhere I go, this is the response I get, but it's so true, and I feel you. I struggle with this too. Last thing is discipline, all right? How much time do I have left? All right, we're good. I'm going to leave you with 2 quotes. Someone told me this one time, and it really resonated with me. The only tragedy in life is when you give up what you want for the long term for what you want right now. If it were a choice between, like for me, eating kale or eating a good salad, that's an easy choice. I hate kale. I'm not choosing that. But the choices are hard because they're both things that we want. You ask anybody privately, do you want to have $1 million one day? Well, yeah, sure. Who's going to say no to that? but yet the decisions you make today are a detriment to that. Okay, we all struggle with this. The second one is this: if you don't make time to work on creating the life that you want, you'll spend an awful lot of time servicing the life you don't want. Okay? These are hard topics, and it's not something you think about on a day in, day out basis, typically. Okay? You got to put it in a place like once a quarter. Check to see where you've gone. Check your investment accounts. Check your budget process. It's boring, I get it, but it is so, so important to having a legacy to leave one day. And that's very important for me, okay? So the last part, stay the course, and I promise you the rewards outweigh the sacrifices. One day you will wake up and you'll be like, oh, wait a minute, I'm here. A goal I set out to do 20 years ago and I've made it. I am here. I promise you there's no greater reward than that, okay? So any questions from me? Yes, sir.
I don't know if I might have missed it the first couple of minutes when I wasn't here, but as far as like with your money side of things on investment, if you were to try and get into investing, would you suggest, like let's say I have $100 to play with,
Yeah.
would you suggest getting invested into 10 different $10 options or one $100 option that you really,
Right.
feel comfortable with?
That is a personal decision. And one thing I also tell you in that accountability circle, you got to find a financial advisor you can trust. Someone who will take the time to get to know you, someone who will talk to you, because what you're really getting at is a risk tolerance problem. Am I comfortable losing it all? If you're comfortable losing it all, invest 100 in one thing. But if you want to split it up 10 ways, that would tell me that you want to take some risk, but you also want to kind of protect yourself a little, spread it out a little more. Warren Buffett says you could put all your eggs in one basket if you watch that basket. And that's kind of his investment philosophy. He believes limited investments, but make sure they're good ones, make sure they match with what you're comfortable with, something you know. And he's done pretty well for himself, I would think. He's also brilliant. There are other people who want diversification and they want safety. And you got to have someone to talk you through it, because part of it's timing too. The condition of the current markets, what's safe, what's overvalued. You need someone who navigates this on a day in, day out basis.
It's like your 401, that's diversified like crazy. Like them guys,
Depending on the options the employer gives you.
that's all over the place. But if it was something you wanted to dabble with yourself, that's what I was
Right.
curious on.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a licensed financial advisor, okay, so let me say that.
I'm looking for more of a suggestion
Yeah.
from somebody from a position that has been around it. I mean,
The only thing that makes me nervous with 401k options that I've seen is when they offer a stock ownership program in the company you're working for. You're already dependent upon them for your income. I don't want to be dependent upon the performance of the company for my retirement. I mean, in theory, if they go bankrupt, they're not contributing to your 401k, yes. But the way they're structured is the money that's diverted is over here. It's not part of the company's assets. And so you're investing in other industries and things like that. That would be the only thing but that's a personal risk measure for me. I mean, if you're working for a small startup and you've got a lot of sweat equity in the deal, you also control the company's outcome. You might be more comfortable, but as you can see, it's an endless maze of conversations. And so it's ongoing. That's why you've got to have someone. I mean, Farm Bureau Financial Services has licensed investment reps to talk to you, but you got to find somebody you trust, and you got to find somebody who's gonna look out for what you want for the long term. So if you got a guy that says, I'd love to sell you this right now, because I'd make a lot, but it's not what's right for you, you might be talking to the right kind of person. Okay? I don't know if that helps or not, but I do. Good. Okay, anyone else? Questions? My pleasure. Like I said, I'm a nerd. I love this stuff. Yes, ma'am.
I met you at the state convention, and I appreciate you being here and agree with the things you're saying. I also work in banking, and one of the things that I'd also like to add to your list of periodic checkups.
Yeah, please.
Check your own credit. Annual credit report.
Absolutely.
Is the only truly free source. But that's free in the name, it's not free.
Yeah.
Annualcreditreport.com. Everybody is entitled to your own credit bureau report from one of the three bureaus.
At least once a year.
And especially with the Equifax data breach, I think eventually we're going to see that. So take a look so that you can understand and know, especially as ag producers. Many of you may be surprised what your credit report looks like. Some of your commercial business loans may not report like you think they are.
Yep.
So take a look at that so you understand it. They will not give you your score for free on that report, but it will show you what your payment history and your open lines, your loans will look like. So if you haven't done that, I would highly recommend it. That's
a great point. You're right. That needs to be in this. The other thing I would add to that is, at least once a week, I get an application from someone in one of my states that has something on their credit report that surprised them. That they either paid off or they had a medical collection for like a small amount, $50. It's not a lot, but it happens all the time. If you don't check your credit report, your credit score just starts going down and you don't even know it, even though you're trying to do everything else correctly. So absolutely do that. Thank you for the comment. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any opinion or advisement on life insurance, term versus whole? Most of us here have children.
Yes.
And then second question, your college savings plans
Yes.
versus.
Okay. First off, my first answer for liability reasons is talk to a registered financial advisor. No. Everybody should have some life insurance. Personal opinion. Unless you have a net worth of $15 or $20 million and you're our age, you have young kids, you need life insurance, okay? Bob opinion. The difference between the built-in savings plans and life insurance are you good at saving? If you're not good at saving, then you might want to buy some of the whole life policies because they're basically saving for you. That's how I look at it. The term policies, especially if you're young, they're so cheap. Get as much as you can afford, okay? If it's, when you're 21, the life tables just simply say you're going to live until you're 50. It's highly unlikely that you're not. So you could get $1 million in coverage for probably, $20, $30 a month, $40 a month. If you're having a young family, funding for college, it's just something you should do, okay? You got some money to leave them, you got a net worth, you got a trust built, that's a whole different ball game. You're self-insured, you might want to look at it differently then. But all that also depends on how you're going to leave the assets to your heirs. And that's where you definitely need a financial planner because as the tax law changes, and especially with the Tax Reform Act with the estate planning rules, get someone who knows the minutia of where you live and what you got and go there. But yes, I do believe in life insurance. I have it myself, my wife has it. Okay? All right, any other questions for me? What are we doing? I got 4 more minutes. College savings, yes, sorry. That's a little more mixed. It depends on who you listen to. I assume you're referring to like the state tuition plans. Works great. Yeah, works great if they go to Nebraska Lincoln or whatever the in-state options. What if they don't? Again, it's an option. I'm also a big believer that not everybody should go to college. We need tradespeople, we need welders, we need plumbers, we need electricians. I don't know if college teaches you those skills as well as a trade school or being an apprentice in a shop.
You're above and beyond.
Yeah.
Too many bachelors now.
Well, yeah. When the shale boom was going up in North Dakota, they couldn't find enough welders. If you were a welder who could work long days, you could write a ticket. You could easily make $250,000 a year during that brief period. It was crazy. The thing I like about 529 plans and some of the other structured plans is they give you options. So let's say you have 3 kids and your oldest decides they don't want to go to college. You could pass it down to the next kid. So it's not just for the first kid only. I like that kind of options, those types of options and functionality, okay? But that's a personal opinion. Saving for college is a great thing, especially if you're getting started when they're born, because you got time, as I showed you, you've got time on your hands. But as you get closer, you're going to want to switch more to a savings mentality because you can't afford any losses. Does that make sense? So I'd love to tell you, yes, absolutely do college savings plans, but it's not that simple. It really isn't. But yeah, if utilized effectively and you've got an investment vehicle that you like, I think they can be incredibly helpful. Okay. Any other questions for me? No, it's 0 to 860 or 840. I always get the top number. It's zero score means you've got no history. You haven't done anything. If you've done something, you're going to have a number. You really want to aim for being above 760. Banks price what's called good credit differently. For some banks, it's 760, some it's 770, some it's 750. The majority I've seen are around that 760 range. If you're in the 800s, you're good. It's about as good as you can do. Okay? Okay, well, thank you very much. Thanks for letting a boring banker and a math nerd come and talk to you. Hopefully I gave you something you can use. I'll be around for a little bit if you have any other questions, because some of this stuff can get rather personal. But thanks again for your attention and your questions. I appreciate it.